Hello, and welcome to another episode of Spotlight on Security Tech Insights. Today, we're going to be talking about identity resilience, which is a topic that more and more enterprises are finding that they need to have a strategy around. Really, what you're going to hear from us today is now is the time for enterprises to really double down on their security practices to ensure from the user level all the way to the business and enterprise level that there are practices in place that ensure Active Directory, which is one of the most critical elements of business authentication for users, is safe. My name is Theresa Miller. I am the Senior Director of Technical Marketing here at Cohesity, and I'm excited to be here today with my special guest, Sean Deuby from Semperis. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself, Sean?
Hi, Teresa. Yes, and thanks for having me on. Um, my role in Semperis is as Principal Technologist Americas, and I spend a lot of my time talking about identity security to people and the importance of it. And it's nice to see that we're gaining traction in that area. I I like to say I've been doing Microsoft Identity as long as Microsoft has been doing identity for both Active Directory and Entra ID, formerly known as Azure Active Directory. And I was one of the original architects of Intel's Active Directory and a 15-time MVP for identity as well. And to note, I'm wearing a special shirt today in honor of this session. I was in Houston speaking at the Cohesity Roadshow about this exact topic. So I thought it was appropriate to put on the Cohesity Semperis shirt for our interview.
That's amazing. I'm glad that you had that opportunity, and I'm really excited to be talking with you today, too. You know, one thing that's kind of interesting, I think, about the two of us is I've been working with identity for a long time as well, but maybe not as long, maybe not as long as you from a career perspective, but we also share that MVP status. So it's nice to get the opportunity to have this conversation with you. So let's go ahead and dive in, Sean. Let's start talking about some of the basics. What are some of the basics around cybersecurity hygiene practices that everyday users can use to secure their identity?
Well, I mean, hopefully it's obvious by now, but we always have to mention MFA, multi-factor authentication. We couldn't have a conversation about everyday identity security, cybersecurity without talking about MFA. And pretty much, the major apps that you work with nowadays as a consumer, most or not, if not all of these, have some kind of MFA associated with them. And you're even getting prompted to sign up for it. And so that's certainly number one, is enable MFA wherever it's available for the apps and the websites that you use. And there's back and forth about whether using MFA through SMS, through text, is safe or bulletproof. And the bottom line is it's way safer than no MFA at all. So hopefully that will get better, but whatever they have for MFA, use it. The second is password managers. And I'm really glad that password managers have gone mainstream since all of this began, because you just can't keep track of all the passwords that you have to have. Humans do password reuse. It really, if you look at the password strategy, the password recommendations out of NIST and others, it's all about getting around the weaknesses of humans. And that's what password managers do. It allows you to use a different password for every site. It allows you to not worry about and not remember what the password is. That's the beauty of it. And you can have and the password managers now also, and I've begun doing this as well, allow you to create unique usernames too. Because if you think about it, when you're joining in an app, if your password manager will remember the username as well as the password, it doesn't have to be the same username. It doesn't have to be associated with your real name. It can be anything you want. It's tracked in the password manager. The other thing that is great about password managers, and again, this comes from the latest NIST guidance, is that, and I think this is great to share far and wide. The challenge with users just remembering individual passwords is what they can put together for a garbled string that computers will figure out in a nanosecond. But password managers allow you to create long, secure passphrases. NIST has decided that what really makes a password less hackable, provided you don't just simply give them the password because you've been phished, is length. Not even complexity, not special characters, not however gnarly it is, it's about length. So what they're encouraging are passphrases, long, secure passphrases, perhaps connected by hyphens, things like that. And password managers allow you to do that, to create passphrases until you can just generate through them until you come up with a passphrase that's like, I can remember that because it means something to you, and could easily be 20 characters long. So that's my encouragement, is for everybody to, if you don't have a password manager, get a password manager of choice. Don't freak out on what is the absolute perfect password manager. Get one of the leading ones and use it, and stop repeating your passwords. Start using their generated passwords, and you can even use them for credit cards as well.
I think these are really important recommendations for our audience. And I think they are super important for the enterprise, but they also carry over to our personal lives as well. And, as you were talking about things, I was thinking about a personal experience. I had an email address and its password get compromised. And I fought with this for months. And really what stopped it was actually going beyond the text-based MFA PIN type response. I had to get an actual authenticator app in place. So I feel like that experience really like doubles down and like every single thing that you've talked about, like have a password manager, so you have the complex passwords, use any MFA, but the more complicated or complex MFA with authenticators, even better, and have those, complex passwords stored in your password manager so you don't have to remember. So I think it's a really solid list, and to hear your experiences and recommendations is even that more validating.
I would add, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say something about passkeys, the next iteration for secure authentication. And we're starting to see passkey adoption. Passkey is a secure credential that is stored. It can be stored only on a local device such as your phone, or most modern password managers will also can store passkey in the password manager, which means it's available on multiple devices. And it is phishing resistant, which is a big deal nowadays. And major applications like Microsoft and Amazon and other major SaaS providers support passkeys. They have their own complexities associated with them. And if you're listening to this interview, you're probably one of the people that will be helping your relatives if they try to implement passkeys. But it's a worthy thing to work on.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's a great call out. Let's go ahead and pivot to our next question, Sean. So, how are cyber attacks impacting Active Directory today, and what trends are you seeing across the industry?
Well, the trend has been for quite a while. The short answer is, how often is Active Directory attacked? And the short answer is all the time. Mandiant, Microsoft, Cohesity's own CERT team says that in a cyber attack, at least 90% of the time, the threat actors they target or they use Active Directory as part of their attack chain. Because once you gain control of Active Directory, you pretty much have everything. You have everything that depends on Active Directory, which over the last 25 years has pretty much grown to be darn near everything in the enterprise on-prem IT environment. And now there are many reasons why threat actors are going after AD. AD has been around, as I just sort of implied, it's literally been around a quarter of a century, which is pretty astonishing. In IT years, that's like a millennium. Nothing lasts that long. And not only has it lasted that long, it's become more important than ever, because as the cloud developed, and when I spent years as a technology journalist, and I wrote about the rise of what was then called identity as a service, or IDaaS, and we now described as cloud identity providers. And at the time, I'm like, who in their right mind would outsource their identity to some third party cloud provider? And but yet here we are in this world. And for pretty much every cloud identity provider, it's changing now as we mature in the industry. But the majority of the identities in these cloud identity providers are actually sourced from on-premises Active Directory. And then, of course, from there, you get single sign-on into all of your SaaS applications, Office 365, Salesforce, you name it. And so what we find ourselves in the situation is this modern hybrid cloud on-prem environment is dependent on a 25-year-old piece of technology that works very well. But to be fair, any application that has been in production for decades, literally decades, and has changes made to it every day, has vulnerabilities introduced to it, let alone the fact that when this product was designed in 1997 and 1998, it was a very different world then. Think about what you were doing in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have is this accumulation of vulnerabilities that happens from being in production and not having real strict governance. Oh, this group is no longer needed, let's get rid of it. That never happens. These users are not needed. Oh, please take me out of this application because I don't use it anymore. Nobody ever says that. And so you have this accumulated set of vulnerabilities, and the threat actors know this. And because AD's been around as long as it has, the attack methods for it are well known. And the way these attacks work nowadays, certainly it's become well known that identities are the source of initial access for most attacks nowadays. I think the latest statistic is 86% of attacks begin with compromised credentials, with logging in with credentials. And of course, they're Active Directory credentials. And they log in from the internet on maybe it's a virtual machine that has an exposed RDP port, or it's a gateway that doesn't have a second factor authentication. They simply log in. And once they're in, they go to AD and they use AD's capabilities, because AD was designed, as I said, in a previous era when it was assumed that the network was safe, the network was secure, the CorpNet. So that when you were on AD and you were authenticated to AD, you wanted to go look around at the resources that were available and make it easy to access and see what resources are available. Well, that's not the world we live in anymore. So yes, the threat actors use that. They use AD for reconnaissance. They use tools such as Mimikatz to gain privileged credentials. They gain control of Active Directory. And then they do what they want with the environment because they can pretend to be anybody. It comes and goes. We see trends. I kind of laugh a little bit at the make a lot of press. As I said, I used to be a technology journalist. a lot of press around maybe if some particular aspect of ransomware drops down a little bit in an annual report, and then people go, oh, maybe things are getting better. Don't kid yourself. The basics are the same. It's extremely profitable to be a ransomware actor. They are, I'm sure that other people have heard this, but if you took all of cybercrime, and not even nation state, if you took all cybercrime and you made it as if it were in one economy, it would be the third largest economy in the world after China and the US. So yeah, it's profitable, and something that profitable and that powerful is not going away.
Yeah, wow, it's interesting to just listen to you on some of the trending. Um, as I mentioned, I've been working with Active Directory specifically and identity for a while. I think my initial start timeframe with it was in the early 2000s, and doing deployments for large scale organizations, migrations. And when I think about, there was an incident that I went through with my colleagues, of course, where we had to figure out what happened. I mean, Active Directory went down hard for a 30,000 user environment, and everything was stalled into a standstill. And to this day, I mean, that the root cause is unknown. The only thing that saved that company was there was one missed domain controller during that incident. And so the rebuild process happened from that one. I think it, happened during a time that was pre these types of attacks. So there wasn't the potential residual lingering within the environment. But fast forward to something like that today, I just can't even imagine, because it likely would have been much more detrimental and much more infiltrated into the organization. So
There is a parallel in the infamous 2017 Maersk NotPetya attack, that the Russian cyber weapon NotPetya hit Maersk. And the only thing that saved that global company from complete disaster in Active Directory is that there was one domain controller in Ghana, Africa, that was offline because there was a power failure. And they rebuilt their AD from that one offline domain controller.
yeah, so it's I appreciate what you're sharing, because it means that our audience, you may not get the grace in this time frame, in this day and age, because it's nonstop, right? You said it with the money that's being made by these organizations that are putting together these attacks, and the sheer quantity of them. Like, you can't rely on that one maybe offline system to be ready. So how do these trends impact enterprise preparedness to recover from a cyber incident, specifically related to Active Directory, Sean?
Well, we've sort of been hinting around this, but it's still not recognized generally how extraordinarily hard AD is to recover and to make trustworthy again after a cyber attack. Because when AD's been attacked, you have two issues to deal with, and I split them into server and service. You have the server aspect of it, which is to actually get AD back and working. You may have one or more domain controllers that are not functional or some degree of broken, and recovering them with a conventional backup and recovery software doesn't usually do the job, because there's malware on the domain controllers, and they're in all kinds of states, and you don't know how long the malware has been sitting there. You don't know what the dwell time is when you're going through all of that. The process that is used to rebuild Active Directory cleanly without malware, the Microsoft approved process, is called the forced recovery. It's called the Active Directory forced recovery process. And when I say it's extraordinarily difficult, I'm not overstating it. I took the forced recovery doc, which is it's online now. It used to be printed out, but I took a PDF of all of the process. And I got rid of the extra links and things like that. And what it comes out to is 40 pages of core process and 100 pages of supplemental processes. This is all of it for real, not padded out.
Wow.
And in the very beginning, they state it's not designed to recover from cyber attacks. So it's extraordinarily manual. It is generic. You have to customize it to your own organization. And then, and I think this gets underemphasized in the people, process, and technology, you have to execute this manual process. People have to execute this manual process generally across multiple data centers at a time when you're at the most stressful time in your IT career. You're in incident response and you have to get it right. And if you get something wrong, you have to do it again. And then, oh, by the way, you have to rebuild every one of your domain controllers back to restore capacity. That's just the server part. The service part is that when the threat actors attack Active Directory, the first thing that they generally do is they do what's called installing persistence. In other words, they put backdoors in Active Directory so that if they get kicked out of the environment, as what happens in incident response, you're trying to get rid of the threat actors. If you're successful in getting rid of the threat actors, they can go out to the dark web, spend $500 and get another set of credentials for your organization, log in the same way that they did the last time, and then go into their backdoor in Active Directory and resume the attack, which is one of the reasons that we have seen in our own ransomware reports that organizations that have been attacked once are attacked multiple times, sometimes in rapid succession. And these backdoors is one of the reasons. So making AD trustworthy is a whole second effort that can take as long as the initial recovery. And of course, while all this is happening, the business is crippled or more likely down.
That's a lot to process.
Sorry.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot to process. You put yourself back in the shoes of the Active Directory administrator, and then you start peeling back the layers on how your CISO is probably assessing and creating some level of accountability. There's really a lot to think about, and so it's layered, making sure you have the right security. But when all is said and done, if something's still hanging out there you're not expecting, recovery. I think it's going to come down to recovery. So Sean, let's pivot to a new question. What are some of the key factors that enterprises should consider protecting their identities and systems to ensure that fast and secure recovery that minimizes the business impact?
Well, two aspects to this. First, step 0 is go out and look at that Active Directory forced recovery process and comprehend what you need to do to at least to customize it so that you can do this yourself. And unfortunately, to say not if, but when you're attacked, because this is something that you need to look at immediately. Look at that. And I actually have a series of LinkedIn posts, and I have a document as well that I also happen to have a copy of here, coincidentally, called a Guide to the Forced Recovery Guide. And what it is I put in a list of gotchas of the forced recovery process that are things that you need to think about in terms of cyber recovery that are just not comprehended here. Real life things that you need to get in place. This is a free document. It's available on our website. And so get started with that immediately so that you have some kind of a cyber focused plan. Our Semperis's Active Directory Forced Recovery product is designed to take the forced recovery process, remove the malware from your Active Directory environment and be able to recover it, we have found on average of 90% faster than a manual forest recovery if you even have and have practiced a forest recovery process. And most organizations haven't because it's so difficult. My colleague, Chris Stevens, has a blog post on our site called 5 Keys to Fault-Tolerant Active Directory Recovery. And in it, he talks about the things that you need to comprehend as you're doing a forest recovery, because even then things inevitably go wrong. It's chaos. I mean, for incident response, crisis management is chaos. So you need to have the ability to recover all domain controllers. When you are doing a manual recovery, the manual recovery basically gets you to a point where you have one domain controller for every domain. But that's not useful in a production environment. You have to rebuild all your capacity back to its previous steps. The ability to do that automatically is a key factor and one of the things that ADFR does. The ability to recover from anywhere to anywhere. Have you ever thought of the scenario? You take system state backups of your domain controllers, as a conventional product, backup recovery product does. They are VMware virtual machines. Very, very, very common. Threat actor comes in the environment. They gain control of Active Directory. They use the administrative accounts that are in Active Directory that administer vCenter, and they crater your VMware environment. This is exactly what happened to MGM Resorts. How do you recover your Active Directory if you don't have VMware? You've got to rebuild your VMware environment before you can rebuild your Active Directory environment. Does your VMware environment depend on AD? All this again while everybody's running around with their hair on fire. ADFR gives you the ability to back up from anywhere to anywhere, from a VMware, restore to Azure VMs or Google Cloud or Dell hardware for that matter, because we back up Active Directory, but we leave the operating system behind, which means we leave the malware and all the hardware drivers behind. So that gives you all sorts of flexibility in where you recover Active Directory. And there are methods. The build back is hard. As I said, it is part of this recovering the server aspect of it. You get one domain controller per forest, per domain. Great. How are you going to do this with all of the other ones that have to be rebuilt? ADFR has the ability to do that automatically via several methods that, again, doesn't require your rather stressed out decisions to make it work. You step back and let it do. And then the ability to regularly test it. One of the many ugly secrets of this whole thing is that nobody tests, or very rarely tests, Active Directory, forest recovery, or disaster recovery, because it's extraordinarily difficult to do. You've got to take a part of your AD and you've got to put it in a test environment. You've got to build it out. There's a ton of things that you have to do. With this product, it allows you to do it as often as you want to. We'll do it with you regularly on a yearly basis, but you can do it on a quarterly basis, or you can do it as often as you want.
There's a lot of really great just nuggets that you just shared. I think the asset that you also mentioned out, the blog post, the 5 keys to fault-tolerant Active Directory, but testing is huge. I think it is extremely challenging, and so to have the ability to do that is outstanding, and to know that there's tooling for that. That makes it simple even better. I think that also really helps support the next question I have for you. So, why do native or manual recovery processes really not work for effective recovery of AD, especially in these days of the threat landscape?
I think the key word in your question is effective. You can do the manual recovery process. It does technically work, but this is where we insert the people into this. It's complicated.
Mhm.
You have to get everything right, and there are a lot of gotchas that will trip you up. And again, that's what that add-on document sort of addresses. And all of that will take more time. And
Mhm.
then it takes more time, and then it takes more time. So from a big picture viewpoint, if I'm management and I'm doing risk analysis of a cyber attack, and I see that there is one system, and actually, in one of our major partners that does incident response, they found out over a course of about 100 engagements, it took them about 21 days to recover basic IT functionality. And of that 21 days, it took 14 days to recover Active Directory. So 2/3 of that 21 days. So if you look at it from a risk analysis viewpoint, that's a huge red flag of something that needs to be addressed. And the manual forced recovery will do it, but when the company's down, it takes time. It takes a lot of time. When Maersk was trying to recover from NotPetya, they managed to rebuild that one domain controller at their IT headquarters in Maidenhead, England. And they're a large company, so the Active Directory database is it was large, and they found themselves as they're starting to rebuild capacity. How am I going to get this database to all of our locations around the world, so to be able to do this rebuild process? I can't just do it over regular lines. It will take forever. And they actually contacted other service providers like Microsoft, and I think I might have been Deloitte, and say, hey, please, can we use your network to take this copy, this 10 gigabyte file or this 20 gigabyte file, and copy it to your offices in this location that we can then copy to a drive, then we can get back there so we can rebuild our domain controllers. This is crazy talk and stuff when one of the world's largest shipping company is down, and you're standing at a Deloitte office with a hard drive saying, can you copy this for me? And can you have someone at the other end let that guy in? So, I mean, if you work through that scenario, it's nuts. So yeah, you can do it manually, but it all takes time.
Yeah, and I think, when you talk about systems being down for a couple of weeks, consider the business cost impact. I was actually this last weekend, I headed over to one of our shipping companies. I'm not going to name names, but I walk up and there's a sign on the door, we're down. And then an employee walks out, yeah, we've been down for 3 days while they're working through whatever issue it is they're working through. So I was like, okay. I mean, think of all the money they lost in those 3 days. Again, I don't know what the cause was, but whatever the case was, it correlates to exactly what you're talking about with downtime. So, um, anyways, let's go ahead and tackle our last question before we wrap up today. Because I think you've made just so many great points about why do we need to be ready? How do we best support a recovery? So at Cohesity, we've worked with Semperis, we've worked with your team on a joint solution to help organizations overcome challenges in identity security today. So, Sean, can you talk a little bit more about what we're doing together to help protect organizations and be able to recover from these attacks?
Sure. Yeah. So this is called Cohesity Identity Resilience. And this partnership gives us the best of both organizations' capabilities to protect, to do exactly what it says, identity resilience, to build up your identity resilience. Our expertise in Active Directory protection and Active Directory recovery, and Cohesity's expertise in protecting data, and in this case, protecting Active Directory data that ADFR and Semperis support. So this gives us several advantages. Number one is proactive Active Directory hardening. So our expertise in looking at indicators of exposure and indicators of compromise to Active Directory as I said, any organization that's had Active Directory in production for years or decades is going to have a lot of vulnerabilities. And for example, our free AD attack surface security tool called Purple Knight has have over 45,000 downloads, and we've had some very sophisticated organizations run it, and they have come back with fairly poor scores because of vulnerabilities that they didn't know they had. So this is the before the attack stuff, the good time of things. I recently I've been quoting Rachel Wilson, who is the director of risk. I don't remember her exact title now, but at director of risk at Morgan Stanley. But she was formerly the director of offensive security at the NSA, and her advice is don't be the slowest gazelle in the herd. So you may not have a perfect Active Directory, but if you make it better and you make it difficult enough, many cybercrime actors will say, look, this is not profitable for me. This is taking me too long. I'm going to go spend $500 and get credentials for another company and go on. But the partnership gives our ADFR backups of your Active Directory. It gives you secure, immutable backups with the capabilities for cyber vaulting. So even if in the worst case scenario, your environment is laid waste, you know that those backups will be safe. And ADFR itself can be quickly reconstituted from those immutable backups so that no matter what happens, you know the crown jewels are safe and you can get Active Directory back quickly with ADFR. Another aspect of this, and I had alluded to it earlier, is finding the backdoors in Active Directory. So the specialized identity forensics and incident response capabilities that Semperis provides. So the ability to assist you in finding those backdoors. And our incident response experts that are world-class experts in Active Directory to help get your Active Directory Entra ID environment back and working again. Another tool that we provide in this partnership is attack path analysis specifically around your Cohesity environment and analyzing any potential attack paths into Cohesity that threat actors might discover that you can close off beforehand, before they can discover it. Again, operating in peace before you have to operate in anger. And then finally, a comprehensive post-breach analysis of what went on in the identity systems so that you can remediate them and not have this rapid reoccurrence like we see.
That was a really great overview of what we're doing together partnership-wise. I know I am personally very excited about what this is going to do for all of our customers jointly. And I think that when you consider what we talked about today, just in summary, how risky it is to go unprotected, not have a tool to bring things back online. I mean, your enterprise with the wrong attack could potentially not only lose money, but go out of business just because of Active Directory not functioning following a cyber attack. So what we're doing together, I think is just foundationally critical for enterprises to be successful when something happens. So
it's unfortunate we have to say when.
Yeah, I know. So Sean, thank you so much for joining me today. You've just been a wealth of knowledge for our audience, and I appreciate you sharing all of your experiences.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation here.
And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. And that wraps up another episode of Spotlight on Security Tech Insights. Thank you all.